this stage, we would like to welcome Traci from KPMG, who is leading one of the data-driven and AI practices. Her talk will be very interesting. KPMG had conducted a very wide survey across a huge number of enterprise clients to understand what challenges they are seeing in enterprise AI adoption. This presentation, which is very popular actually, highlights some of the 8 key learnings that KPMG had when they interacted with different enterprises across the industry verticals. So over to Traci. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me here today. What I'm going to talk through is a bit about what we've been experiencing in terms of trends. And I'm going to touch on a few of the different topics that Brad mentioned quickly, but I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. And I very much would welcome your questions and your comments and to make this interactive. So please, raise a hand, yell out, throw something at me, whatever. But let's make this a conversation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have and diverge as would be of interest. So let me start by just a little bit of background on why we did this. Maybe this isn't going to work. There we go. So maybe a little bit of background on why we did this. So the clock speed dilemma. Things are moving very fast. Things have been moving very fast for a number of different years. And if we go back in time and we look at the evolution of different types of labor productivity changes, generation and eras over eras, there's been a lot of changes in productivity of labor over 150 years of recent history. And when we look at some of the things that have happened here, we've looked at the speed that comes through this. And one of the things that I like to look at is the anecdote, I'm sure you've heard of it, the time to 50 million users. So if you look at like radio and television, it took like 50 years or something to get to 50 million users, but Pokemon Go took 9 days. So like the speed of adoption, the speed of the way that we're accelerating through technology, using technology and becoming technology driven is extraordinarily quick. And as we look at kind of the age we're at right now, where we're looking at coming out of this phase we've been in for the last 10 years, where we've really started capitalizing on analytics, where we've really started being able to utilize the amount of data that's being generated, we're now moving into this automation and AI phase where we need to get value out of this. And the same type of acceleration that we've seen in something like Pokemon Go adoption is kind of the speed that we think artificial intelligence is going to start to hit. Now, I'm not talking about speed to general artificial intelligence, right? I think we're still probably, 30, 40, 50 years from real general artificial intelligence. But the adoption of AI in the enterprise is something that is hitting this acceleration speed. And so we took a step back and said, what really is happening in the enterprise? Now, we have a lot of observations from working with our clients every day, helping them to utilize AI, helping them to analyze what's on the landscape of AI and what's going to provide value to them. But we thought, hey, since we're so rooted in data and analytics, maybe we should use some data and analytics and actually look at this a little bit more scientifically. So we embarked on this survey, and the survey was really aimed at talking to large enterprises that are using AI in some way today and probing with them on how are you using it, how is it changing your organization, how much money are you spending, how many people are you hiring, what kinds of technology are you using, and trying to get down to what does enterprise AI look like today and where is it going in the near and maybe distant future. So we spent a bit of time and we did some research of our own, looking at available information on a lot of different organizations. We also spent a lot of time interviewing those responsible for AI within a set of very large organizations. So the majority of these would fall into Fortune 500 or in fact Fortune 100 in terms of the companies that we talked to. And we got some interesting information. A lot of it to us was validation on what we're seeing on the ground every day with our clients. But we definitely learned quite a bit about the speed of adoption within the enterprise, as well as some of the challenges that they're seeing. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. So it really boils down to 8 trends. And there's a lot of data behind this, and there's a lot of kind of sub-trends under here that I'll dig into. But the 8 trends essentially break down to this. Really quickly, rapid shift from experimentation into production, into applied usage of it. As Brad mentioned, so many organizations have been experimenting but have had a failure to launch. They've been stuck in the lab. They have really cool things that they've developed, but they can't actually put them into production. And what we're seeing is a rapid movement in this, and we'll talk about that some more. Another point that Brad had highlighted was the Trifecta, or Gartner calls it hyper-automation, and another analyst firm calls it the Trifecta. And if you go out there, every analyst firm is talking about this, but what it really is the combination of automation, analytics, and AI together. And I'll probe a little bit on that. Enterprise demand is growing, no secret there, but we'll dive into some details. Organizational structures and capabilities and the criticality of those. Internal governance, closely partnered with the control of AI, along with rise of AI as a service and the competitive and the shift to the competitive landscape. So I'm going to dive into each one of these areas a little bit, and again, please stop me, ask questions, point to what you're most interested in. So let's start with rapid shift. So there's been such a failure to launch. So organizations have in pockets been coming out and saying, we're going to go ahead and we're going to experiment in finance. We're going to experiment in HR. We're going to experiment in the front office. And they've bought interesting software. They've hired data scientists to do interesting experiments. But when it comes to actually making it usable and embedding it into their everyday business as usual operations, they've really struggled. And what we found was that in terms of the actual adoption at production scale, we took it from two angles. We took it from an automation angle, so like a robotics process automation type of software angle, and we also took it from an AI angle. And when you look at the RPA angle, it was very interesting, and I'm just going to look at my statistic here. 83% of the organizations that we talked to said that within 3 years they expect RPA to be enterprise-wide in every function. Today, about 26% of them said that they were using it across the enterprise in various different places, but within 3 years, 83% of them said that it would be across the organization. Then we looked at it from an AI angle, from a non-RPA configuration angle. And what they said was only 17% were using it beyond departmental levels. So individual departments using AI, but at an enterprise level, cross-functionally, in production, only 17% of them said that they were able to achieve that. And when we look at the companies that were actually able to achieve this, we refer to them in our study as the mature companies, the mature AI companies. And it's probably no surprise that most of them were digital-first technology organizations or technology-native organizations, and the others were financial services, large financial services organizations. Other industries were lagging in terms of their ability to achieve this maturity. But across all of the organizations that we talked to, over half of them said within 3 years they want enterprise-wide AI. So only 17% have it today, but over half of them said within the next 3 years we have to have it across the enterprise. So touching every function, cross-functionally, and operating in production. So this shift, while it's been very difficult, the nut has been cracked, at least in some industries, and the other industries are saying, we recognize now we have to get out of the lab. We have to get over this failure to launch. And the other piece that they're recognizing is they need help to do it. They can't do it on their own. So next we have up this combination. So what this is really about is there's been a lot of frustration in organizations, not just in the failure to launch aspect of this, but also in the reaping the benefits. So one of the things that Brad noted was that there's a lot of organizations that are frustrated with the value they get out of AI, the value that they've gotten out of their RPA implementations. They're looking at it and they're saying, I really thought we were going to automate 50% of this process. I really thought that I was going to be able to have this massive productivity gain by putting in this new system, by putting in this new AI. And they're a little bit disappointed by the results. And it's not because of a failure of the technology. It's a failure of the ability to connect the different types of technology and the different types of technology to people. So when we talk about this trifecta, what we're really talking about is the ability to bring together insights driven from analytics with RPA automation to get the low-hanging fruit execution, the transactional things completed, along with the AI to advance it forward into the things that the RPA can't do. So, a quick example. So we've been working with a number of large financial organizations in their LIBOR transition. And I don't know if anyone here is familiar with this issue, but essentially the reference LIBOR rate exists in over 300 trillion assets worldwide. So financial instruments like credit agreements, different types of loan agreements, derivatives, et cetera. And LIBOR is being retired at the end of 2021. So every single financial instrument in the world that uses LIBOR as its reference rate has to be replaced with a new reference rate. And the client that is subject to that rate has to sign off on the new contract with that rate before the end of 2021 when it retires. So this is a massive issue in financial services. And when we looked to solve this problem, we thought, okay, so we can use some AI to train the machine to understand how to identify the different elements within, say, commercial credit agreements, and understand what is the implication of LIBOR in this contract, and moreover, where can it go? What is the transition path that can be suggested for each one of these contracts? And that's great. I'm essentially saying I'm going to use AI, though, for this piece of the problem. I'm forgetting about the piece that is, I actually have to first identify where all these contracts are. Once I identify where all the contracts are and I use the AI in order to give me an informed decision on every contract, I have legal experts that need to review them. I have a process by which I have to actually send these amendments out to clients, and the clients have to review them and sign or not sign. If they don't sign, then there's a negotiation process that has to kick off with my legal team. So there's this whole process behind it. So we took a step back and said, well, you know what? The AI piece of it is really important and really cool, and we're happy that we can do it, but we have to bolt it together with an RPA system that can go get information out of relevant systems within the organization to pull it back for combination with the information we extract from the contracts. And we have to combine it together with a workflow case management tool that can be used by the people that are actually reviewing the contracts and making the decisions with the clients. So we're gluing together the AI with analytics and RPA with low-code platforms. It's this convergence of things together that actually are reaching 80, 90% process automation versus only one in particular. And this is where we're actually starting to see the most value come in organizations. When you're only using one piece of it, you're only getting one piece of benefit. But when you combine them together, you get an exponential value out of the initiatives. So enterprise demand is growing, no secret. What was interesting was when we started to look at where companies were today in terms of adoption and investments, and where they were going in the future, we learned quite a bit. So the first was that on average, of the organizations that we talked to that we considered to be mature organizations, they had at a minimum 375 people dedicated to AI. And of those, they said that they think that those teams will grow to above 600 within a 3-year period. Now, this is just dedicated to AI. This isn't including the entire IT organization running different technology that might be supporting it. It's not the business people that are training the models. It's just the dedicated AI people. Furthermore, they're spending about $75 million a year right now. Yes, please.
Can you give us an idea of when you say AI team, what does that mean? What does the AI team mean in the organization?
So for the purposes of the survey, what we said was data scientists or engineers dedicated to AI initiatives. That was the definition used in the study. Now, different organizational structures have different definitions for what an AI team looks like. And actually, I'll talk about that a little bit more in organization. But that was the definition for the survey. Yeah.
And how is it in comparison to the overall size of the company? Like what percentage of the people are dedicated towards AI?
I don't know the exact percentage, but the quick answer would be a very small percentage. because most of the organizations that we talked to were large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. So if you look at the size of those organizations compared to the AI team, it's only a very small percentage. But actually, we expect that to continue to perpetuate. And it's actually another piece that I'm going to dive a little bit more on when we get to organization, as it relates to how organizations are going to be able to expand, given that AI talent isn't easy to find and even harder to keep. And so the expansion that they need in order to capitalize on these benefits and remain competitive has to be achieved in different ways. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. Yeah?
Any comments on whether they're growing the talent in-house, or are they just hiring from the outside?
Yes. So it's the build, rent, buy dilemma, right? So do I build my talent? Do I buy my talent? Or do I rent my talent, right? I am a rented body, right? Do I upskill my people? Do I try to inorganically hire them? Or do I lean on other organizations to help complement? The quick answer is, depending on the organization, they have different strategies, but all three, build, buy, and rent, all three of those are imperative and on the docket of what they're doing. The percentages by each vary very differently in terms of where they actually get the talent from. So not necessarily a statistic from the study, but something that I've observed in my working with these clients is that if I bifurcate kind of different industries and organizations, by and large financial services companies are saying, I want my talent, and I want my talent in-house. And there definitely is a significant volume of work that they are asking others to help them with. And sometimes that's consulting firms, sometimes that's universities, sometimes it's partnerships with boutiques and startups. And but by and large, when they look at the talent that they are going to leverage for their AI, they want it in-house. And a lot of that is because of the paranoia around competitive advantage. They're very paranoid about how what they work on is going to be now used by somebody across the street from them. When I go to some other industries, the very large organizations in a lot of other industries, healthcare, life sciences, oil and gas, et cetera, they're a bit more split. They're a bit more, I don't know how big I want my internal organization to be, because I'm not sure, I'm not necessarily bought in on all of the value yet in order to build giant teams. So I'm going to spend a lot more time in that borrow category or that rent category. So it's it is a mixed bag, and industry definitely makes a difference.
Quick question. So
Yeah.
you asked about data scientists.
Yeah.
So there's also a component of like how, is it because people are, companies are just now starting to do their AI, or do they also have the business people working on the applications of AI?
Yeah. So great question. So one of the things, so I'll kind of take a tangent here into organization for a second, because it's a big topic. So the first is that we all recognize that the amount of talent that is in the data scientist, software engineering, full stack developer skill set is pretty tapped out, right? And the ability to scale is today dependent on that talent. And what a lot of organizations haven't realized, and is part of the reason why they've had that failure to launch, is because they haven't been involving the entire enterprise in their AI initiatives. So one of the things that Brad touched on was this topic of data literacy. And this wasn't a specific topic that we talked about in our survey. And if I could go back, I would have asked it to be a topic. But it's actually something that I see in the market right now as one of the biggest trends in AI, is the concept of data literacy. And what I mean by data literacy is a few different things. So the first is the ability for everyone in the organization to understand AI foundational concepts. So, I don't expect that I'm going to take my HR business partner and turn them into somebody that can build a neural net, right? It's kind of absurd, and that's not going to happen, right? But maybe my HR business partner needs to fundamentally know what deep learning is. My HR business partner needs to fundamentally understand the risks that she needs to ask about when somebody says, here's your prediction in turnover, right? It's about educating business users on how to utilize what comes out of it and also participate in the training of the AI. And that's actually another one of these topics that is huge. Is there's actually a lot of startups that are coming up right now that are data labelers, that are acting as that business process knowledge worker to do data labeling, because the ability to train the AI is as important as the people that are actually building the models. And so that's another part of this data literacy is how am I as a finance analyst, how am I as a procurement expert going to participate in AI projects to be one of those people that is helping to build and train the system that is going to turn back and give me insight. And understanding that full circle of I can put in what I put into it, I'm going to get benefit back out from is something that very few organizations really understand today.
And it's important to involve the business side early so that they build what is important.
Yeah. I mean, go back to fundamentals, right? Folks familiar with the CRISP-DM data modeling framework? So it's a framework for data modeling. And the very first piece of this cycle of how to execute is business understanding. You don't start picking at data. You don't start throwing algorithms at data. You don't start looking at what kind of correlation have I got from this data until I understand the business problem, until I understand the business opportunity. And in any program, project, process that's looking to use AI, if the business isn't a core piece of the development of it, it'll fail, period. It'll fail. And it's another piece of this data literacy. So one part of it is foundational understanding so that I understand how to ask the right questions. Another piece of it is foundational understanding so I know how to be involved with it. And then another piece is how do I consume it and use it? How do I actually make it useful in my processes? Yeah.
On this note, I have a friend who used to be CIO of a $20 billion conglomerate, and he recently quit to join some consulting company as a partner, and asked him why did he leave. He was the chief digital officer, and he said that all CEOs talk about digital transformation, and they all have these high expectations, but they are not willing to commit the budgets that is needed for achieving digital transformation. So it's very stressful, and that's why he quit. Is that a pattern, or is that a particular case?
I'd say it's both. I do think that there is a pattern, and again, this goes back to this data literacy concept. And in fact, I recently did. Myself and one of my colleagues, Shrikar, who's over there, he and I recently have been working a lot on this topic. And one of the things that we feel is a blocker to that ability to get out of failure to launch, that ability to really get into enterprise scale production AI, is the lack of literacy at an executive level. And we actually spent 2 days, 4 hours each day, so for a total of 8 hours, with the entire C-suite at one of the largest aerospace and defense companies in the world. And it was the CEO that asked us to come in, and he said, I hear about AI, I hear about what people want to do with it, I hear about these pocketed projects, but I really don't understand what they're doing, I really don't understand the value that they're getting, and I'm not really seeing any real transformation. And I think, this is him, he said, I think it's because we're not speaking the same language, we're not understanding what it really takes, and I think I need to educate them. And that's the problem, is that our executive boards are seeing hype. They're seeing commercials, they're hearing, reading in magazines about these out-of-the-world types of things. They're seeing autonomous vehicles. They're looking at the experience they get as a customer in working, in engaging with things like Netflix and Amazon, and they're saying, well, we should be doing it. But what they don't understand is what it takes to do it from a pure volume capacity and dollars perspective, the time it takes to do it, and the business involvement required to make it work. And that education process and that ability to bring data literacy from the very top of the house to the bottom of the house is, I think, the #1 biggest blocker in AI production adoption at an enterprise scale today.
Do you have any examples where it has been successfully done in companies?
There's lots. I mean, you know, the majority of the organizations that we would talk about would be obviously the big technology organizations, right? That are looking at everything from a digital first footprint. I wouldn't say like, hey, here's this company and they've done it well, because I don't think anybody's done, right? But what I would say is there's a lot of organizations that are significantly moving on that scale in the right directions and building that momentum in a big way. I can't specifically talk about any client names, but I think that the speed in financial services is moving at a very rapid pace, and we're going to continue to see it that way. I also think that there's a lot of movement happening in places like oil and gas and life sciences. And those specific industries, I think, are starting to latch on to how they can make it happen, and doing so at a large-scale basis. They're also the ones that are investing, particularly life sciences and financial services. They're the ones that are willing to invest in the literacy programs that are going to educate their entire population. Okay, so let me jump through a couple here. I talked a lot about the organizational capabilities, so I won't dwell here because I think we covered it in previous discussion. But the point is that there's going to be some operating model disruption happening in organizations. One of the interesting points about this in the survey was we asked, what is your organization? How are you organizationally aligned around artificial intelligence? And it was interesting because about 50% of the organizations we talked to said AI is aligned under the CIO. 40% said AI is aligned under a business leader or business leaders. And then there was 10% that was in other pockets. What's interesting about this is if I dial back 3 or 4 years, all of AI was in the office of the CIO. They were the ones buying technology, investing in it, talking about it, et cetera. And I would say if I looked at this statistic 3 years ago, it would have said 90% CIO, 10% business. Now I'm seeing 50% CIO, 40% business. And if I look at this in 3 years, I bet it says 80% business, 20% CIO. And the reason is all of the things that we were just talking about around how to make it work. If there's not business involvement, if there's not business training, if there's not business literacy, if there's not process adoption, it's wasted money. Now, the CIO is going to be imperative to the adoption of AI, to the ongoing development of AI, to the support of AI. Make no mistake, their involvement is paramount. But the owning the AI and the responsibility for getting value out of the AI is shifting to the business, and I think is going to continue to shift to the business. Couple other last things. So these next two topics are interconnected, which is the need for internal governance and the need to control AI. So what we're talking about on these two topics is that we don't open a paper today without reading something about somewhere somebody being accused or some negative commentary about something that AI has done. And usually it has something to do with either explainability or bias, right? So, latest big one is the accusation that there is gender bias in Apple Card, right? So, fingers are getting pointed at Goldman Sachs, and they're saying there's bias in the way that credit limits are set on the Apple Card. Well, I can tell you that there isn't an organization in the world, including Goldman Sachs, that would ever do that deliberately, right? There's no reason for them to do that deliberately. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't some bias in that model. Now, I know nothing about that particular model. I didn't build it, so I can't comment on it on a discrete level. But what I can tell you is that what is burgeoning out of these types of situations is the ability for organizations to truly govern the AI that they have how they're using it, where it's feasible, where it should be using, developing that AI compass of how they're going to plan and monitor for the AI that they're doing, along with the controlling aspect of it, which is how do I ensure that the AI I build has explainability, that bias has been managed, that I can trust the AI that I'm using. And in the organizations that we talk to, and I'm just going to look back at my statistic here for a second, only 25% of the mature companies that we talked to said they had control frameworks in place. Formal control frameworks with formal AI governance processes in place. We're not regulated yet in this way, right? There's no legislation yet on how AI is controlled, but make no mistake, it's coming. And it's going to come faster than we think it's going to come. And if you look at things like the OECD's recommendations on responsible AI and the types of things that they're saying should be rooted in the AI that we do, these are the types of things that right now are recommendations that in 2, 4, maybe 6 years will be law. They will be regulations that organizations have to abide by. And if I look at things like the financial services industry that already has strict regulations around what they need to do with model management inside of their organization and the extensive stress testing and validation they have to go through for anything that is impacting financial decisions, I think that is the kind of rigor and the kind of legislation and the kind of regulation that we're going to see on all AI in the next 5 years. Organizations today that are leaping forward and creating governance structures and formal control frameworks for the way that they're controlling AI in their organization are going to be far better prepared for when that legislation drops. The organizations now that are just cranking away and saying, I'm just going to create my AI and hope for the best, they're going to be in a world of hurt when all this legislation drops, because they're going to have to go back and look at every AI model and look at every AI process and figure out, how do I put the control frameworks in place that I should have had in the first place that I now have to have because of regulation? So these two topics, I think, are another one that is hugely on the uptrend, and I think is going to actually accelerate faster than almost anything else, maybe other than data literacy. Next is AI as a service, and we bucket this into two facets. AI as a service in the realm of managed service, where we're talking about, I'm going to consume AI as a service. So I'm going to shoot my data out to somebody, and they're going to shoot me back the AI, right? Truly having somebody else perform it for me. Now, middle market companies are the biggest target for this, because they don't have the ability to build the kinds of organizations, the kinds of skill sets that are needed to do AI, but that doesn't mean that they can't just not be competitive. So the ability for them to have vendors and partners that can help them to actually manage their AI for them, to actually give them the answers, AI as a service, is one of the trends that we saw pretty significant. Not as much in the mature organizations that are building the capabilities themselves, but at some of the lower maturity organizations. The second piece of this is the ongoing adoption of microservices. So the ability to be able to consume bite-sized chunks of AI capability and build my own capabilities based on those things. So this is the backs of what Google and Microsoft and so many others are built on, is the ability to have individual types of APIs and microservices that do this one task very, very well, but don't actually solve a problem, don't actually solve a business problem. The ability to consume all of this various different types of this types of functionality and then build it into something that does solve a problem, this is something that is very much on the upswing. Organizations want to consume this type of functionality because they don't have the engineering talent or depth in order to build these large-scale types of capabilities. But what we can do is utilize them and build the things that solve business problems. Lastly is competitive landscape, and I think that this is kind of spirited in everything that we've talked about, is that every organization we talked to said that AI is part of their ability to stay competitive. And in the organizations that were in our mature bucket, they said on average they're getting about 15% uplift in productivity from the use of AI in their organization. Now, the less mature companies were struggling to get productivity, but the mature ones say 15% productivity uplift from just the use of AI in their organization. And further, when we looked at the mature companies and we looked at the less mature companies, the level of investment was significantly different too. So there was a 10-fold gap in level of investment between the mature companies and the less mature companies as it relates to what they're investing in AI, not only today, but what they planned to invest in the future. So there's a definite stake in the ground that says that if you're going to get value, you've got to spend the money to get it, and you've got to be willing to spend it not in the short term, but for the long term. Yeah?
What are the mature companies seeing that the not so mature companies are not seeing, and the reason for the difference in investments? Why currently AI is not providing them the data they need to have any business impact, right? From what you said earlier on. So what are the mature companies seeing that the not so mature companies are not seeing?
I don't think it's what they're seeing. I think it's
Are they being promised are they living on hope, or what's happening?
No, not necessarily. I think that there's a few different buckets. So there's the bucket of companies that feels their data is so bad that they can't move to AI until they solve their data problem. That's one bucket. Another bucket is, I don't want to be the guinea pig, so I'm going to wait till somebody else does it really well, and then I'm going to be the second mover. I don't want to be the first mover. That's another bucket. Then there's a third bucket where the executive committees are still rooted in gut instinct and do believe that AI is a flash in the bucket. That's a lesser population, but there are still some that say, yeah, this AI thing is, eventually there's going to be some cool things to do, but I'm not going to invest in it big right now. I've been around for 150 years, and nobody's going to change my product. Everybody's always going to want my product, et cetera. That does exist. Smaller population, but it does exist. But generally speaking, those are kind of the three areas. The fourth, I would say, is organizations that have spent some money on AI haven't seen the return on the investment from it and have gotten frustrated. There was a wave of companies maybe 3 years ago that jumped onto an AI wave, spent big dollars in IT on AI, didn't see any return on investment because the business was disconnected from the initiatives, but they don't understand that that's why. So all they see is, I wrote a big check and didn't get anything back. And so they're hesitant, they don't trust it in order to continue going big for a while. But I'll say that those sentiments are where minds are starting to be changed. It's where they're looking around and they're saying, those folks that didn't want to be first movers, well, there's first movers now, so they better start moving, right? And that the ROI that we see some other things are starting to peak up. So they're starting to see those benefits. So, even the doubters, I'll say, are starting to move to the other side.
So when they talk about AI, what do they have in their mind? Is it building models?
Oh, that is such a great question.
Insights?
Yeah. So,
Because AI is a sort of blanket term for everything from here to magically solve my
yeah.
problem. What does it think of? When you mention AI to them, what does the picture in their head?
You could have, that is the problem.
Is the problem definition?
They don't know. What they know is it's something I need to use. I'm going to steal my colleague Srikar's story for a second. He told me a story about walking into a client, and he walked in and the client said, I want to do a cognitive project. And he said, okay, great, I'll come back with some ideas. And he came back with these really great ideas pertinent to the business that leveraged machine learning and deep learning and a bunch of other stuff. And he said, here's 3 or 4 ideas on ways that I think that you can do a cognitive project. And the executive looked at the ideas and he said, these are all really cool ideas, but I want to do a cognitive project. These are, and that's part of the data literacy problem, is they don't understand what it is. They don't understand how it applies to their business.